He laughed at my torn shirt, never knowing I traded every dream of mine for his future. I remember the first day I put on that old shirt, the same one my son now mocks with a careless laugh, as if fabric could tell the worth of a man. Back then, it was new, crisp, a symbol of beginnings when I still had dreams of my own. But dreams are fragile when responsibility knocks too early, and mine shattered the day I chose to put his life ahead of mine. Every tear in that shirt, every faded color, every loose thread is not neglect but testimony. Testimony of the countless jobs I took, the nights I worked until my hands bled, the mornings I skipped meals so that he could eat, grow, and learn. The world only sees rags, but I see a history of choices, sacrifices, and love woven into every fiber that still clings to my back. When he was still a child, I would watch him sleep, his chest rising and falling softly, unaware of the storms outside our door. There were nights the roof leaked, and I placed buckets in silence so the dripping water wouldn't wake him. Nights when my stomach twisted in hunger, but I smiled because his little plate was full. The shirt was already fading then, but I held onto it because buying another meant fewer books for him, fewer pencils, fewer chances to keep his path lit when mine had already turned dark. I never wanted him to see the fear in my eyes, the fear of not being enough, the fear of failing him. So I wore my old clothes like armor, shielding him from truths he was too young to bear. As he grew older, I worked harder. I sold what I once held dear, my guitar, my wedding ring, even the small watch my father had given me, just so tuition could be paid on time. I remember standing in front of the pawn shop, holding that watch in my hand, whispering an apology to the man who had passed it down to me. But when I looked at my son's school books later that night, when I heard him talk about the future he wanted, it felt worth it. The world doesn't clap for fathers like me, fathers who sacrifice silently. They look at the surface, the torn shoes, the patched trousers, the same shirt worn one too many times, and now, tragically, even my own son sees only that surface. I still recall his first day of high school. He asked for new shoes, the kind all the other boys were wearing. I counted the money in my pocket and knew it wasn't enough. That night I took on another job, cleaning floors until dawn, my body aching, my lungs filled with dust. A week later, I placed the shoes on his bed before he woke up. The look on his face, that smile, was the closest thing to heaven I had ever known. He didn't know the cost, and I didn't want him to. The cost wasn't just money. It was hours of sleep, my health, my dignity. But none of that mattered because he walked proudly, and for a moment I felt like I was enough. Years went by, and my clothes grew older with me. They aged faster, perhaps, than they should have, because I refused to buy for myself. Every paycheck went straight into his education fund. Every unexpected coin went to his school trips, his books, his uniforms. I stitched my pants when they tore, patched the elbows of my shirts, and polished the same shoes until the leather cracked. When people asked me why I dressed so modestly, I just smiled. I never told them the truth, that I could not bear to see my son deprived of even a single opportunity because of me. My body carried the weight of exhaustion, my clothes carried the scars of sacrifice, and my soul carried the quiet pride of knowing he was moving forward while I stayed behind. And yet, the older he became, the less he saw. He stopped noticing the sacrifices, the quiet exchanges of my comfort for his growth. He stopped hearing the unspoken stories in the creases of my clothes. Instead, he saw only the surface, just like everyone else. He saw an old man in tattered clothes and compared me to fathers who looked younger, richer, sharper. I could see the shame in his eyes when his friends looked at me. He started walking faster when we were together in public, lowering his voice when I spoke, as if he wished I were invisible. That hurt more than any hunger, more than any night without rest. I remember one particular day. He had just come back from college, his voice filled with theories, knowledge, and confidence. I listened with pride, nodding, smiling, but when he glanced at my shirt, threadbare with a button missing, his lips curved into a smirk. "Dad, you should really buy new clothes," he said, half joking, half serious. The words pierced me deeper than any knife. He didn't say it with gratitude, didn't say it with awareness of what I had given up for him. He said it with mockery, with the casual cruelty of someone who had forgotten the foundation he stood on. And in that moment, the shirt I wore no longer felt like armor. It felt like a wound exposed. I wanted to tell him everything then. The nights I cried alone, the days I worked until my body trembled, the treasures I sold, the dignity I swallowed, just so he could sit in a classroom and never feel the hunger, the fear, the uncertainty I endured. But my words stuck in my throat. How do you tell your own child that your very soul has been torn apart to keep his intact? How do you reveal sacrifices when the person you made them for no longer values them? So I stayed silent. I let him laugh, let him mock, because maybe one day, when life strips him down, he will understand. Even now, I keep that shirt. I fold it carefully, place it in the drawer, and sometimes I take it out late at night when no one can see me. I run my hands over its worn fabric, and I see not poverty, not shame, but love. Love so strong it broke me. Love so strong it gave him wings. wings while leaving me crawling. Maybe he will never see it that way. Maybe he will always remember me as the father in old clothes, instead of the man who gave up everything so his son could stand tall. But I know the truth, and sometimes truth is enough, because in the end, clothes can be replaced, youth can fade, and pride can be broken. But what I gave him, the chance to dream, the chance to rise, the chance to laugh without fear of tomorrow, that is something no mockery can erase. He doesn't see it yet, but one day when he looks back and realizes what it took for him to become who he is, perhaps he will understand. And when that day comes, he will see my old clothes not as a shame, but as a crown, invisible to the eyes of the ungrateful. Until then, I wear them not with embarrassment, but with quiet dignity. The breaking point came on an evening I will never forget. We were standing in the living room, his voice loud, sharp, filled with the arrogance of youth, while mine was quiet, trembling, filled with years of swallowed silence. He looked at me, at my worn shirt, my patched trousers, my shoes with soles nearly gone, and he laughed again, this time not out of humor, but out of disdain, as though my very existence in that state was an embarrassment to him. Something inside me cracked, not because of the words, but because of the eyes that had once looked at me with admiration, now burning with shame. My heart pounded in my chest, not from anger, but from a grief so deep it suffocated me, as if the air itself no longer wanted to enter my lungs. I felt my hands trembling, and for the first time I raised my voice. It startled him. He had never heard me like that before. "Do you think these clothes define me?" I asked, my voice breaking but carrying decades of unsaid truths. He smirked, dismissing me, but I pressed on, the words tearing through my throat like shards of glass. I told him of the nights I bled through my fingers so his books would stay open, the mornings I swallowed hunger so his plate could be full, the treasures I pawned so his tuition would be paid. Each confession landed like a blow, not on him, but on me, because saying them aloud made me relive every moment, every wound, every sacrifice I had buried deep inside. For years, I had wanted to protect him from the weight of my sacrifices, to keep his shoulders light, to let him walk without the chains I carried. But in that moment, my silence no longer served him. It only served his arrogance. I could not allow him to believe that dignity was measured by cloth, that worth was judged by brands, that love could be dismissed by laughter. My voice grew stronger, and with every word, tears burned in my eyes, not of weakness, but of release. I told him the truth he had never asked for, the truth he had chosen not to see. He stood frozen, the smirk fading from his face as I spoke. He had never seen me cry, never seen me stand tall in my brokenness. And yet there I was, stripped of pride but clothed in something greater, raw truth. "I sold my life," I whispered, "so you could buy yours." The silence after those words was heavier than any scream. The walls seemed to echo with the weight of them, and I could see his chest rise and fall unevenly, his eyes darting as if searching for an escape, but there was none. Truth has no exit, only confrontation. I approached him slowly, my old shoes dragging across the floor, each step like thunder in my ears. I lifted my hand, not to strike, but to show the calluses, the scars, the skin worn down by decades of labor. "These hands," I said, "built your tomorrow while destroying my today." I watched his eyes fall upon them, confusion and shame colliding in his expression. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. And in that silence I felt something shift, as though the invisible wall between us had finally cracked. My voice grew steadier as I told him of the day I pawned my wedding ring, the tears I shed in secret, the humiliation I swallowed at the hands of men who thought my desperation was amusing. I painted every picture for him, not to make him pity me, but to make him see me. "You mock my clothes," I said, "but they are the flag of every battle I fought for you." My tears fell freely then, staining the fabric he despised, and for the first time I no longer felt ashamed of them. They were not tears of weakness. They were the blood of truth, finally flowing. His eyes glistened, but pride kept him silent. I could see the storm inside him, the tug of realization pulling at his arrogance, yet his youth chained him still. I did not beg for his apology, nor did I demand his gratitude. All I wanted was for him to understand that love is not measured in appearances, but in sacrifices unseen, that the man he laughed at was the reason he could stand tall enough to laugh at all, that without me, his education, his dreams, his confidence would have been nothing but fragile illusions. I stood straighter than I had in years, my voice calm now, almost a whisper, but sharper than any scream. "If you are ashamed of me," I said, "then you are ashamed of the very roots that gave you strength, and a tree that despises its roots will not stand for long." His head lowered, his lips pressed together, his body stiff, as though every word had landed like a hammer upon him. I saw his chest shake, a sign of the battle within, and I knew the boy I raised was at war with the man he thought he had become. The climax was not in my words alone, but in the silence that followed. A silence so heavy it pressed against the walls, against our chests, against the very air between us. He did not laugh anymore. He could not. The echoes of truth had stripped him of mockery quickly, leaving only the raw mirror of reality. I had bared my soul, laid my life open like a book, and for the first time he was forced to read it, and whether he liked it or not, those words would remain etched into him, a scar invisible but eternal. In that moment I realized something I had never understood before. The climax was not about breaking him, nor about winning an argument. It was about reclaiming myself, about standing in my torn clothes and saying, I am not less, I am not shame, I am sacrifice, I am love. And in that declaration I felt taller, stronger, freer than I had in years. He looked at me, not as a man in rags, but as the father who had given him everything. And though his lips did not form the words, I could see it in his trembling eyes. He finally understood. When the storm of my words finally settled, silence hung between us like a fragile thread, ready to snap at the slightest movement. I stood there, breathing heavily, my chest rising and falling with the weight of everything I had just revealed. My son kept his head lowered, his fingers twitching as though they longed to undo time itself. For the first time, he wasn't the confident young man who mocked, who judged. He was once again the boy I had raised, the boy who once looked at me with wide eyes full of trust. And in that moment, my anger dissolved into something deeper, something softer. I saw not just the man he was becoming, but the child who still lived within him, yearning to understand, even if pride kept his lips sealed. I took a step back and sat down, my old chair creaking beneath me, the wood groaning like my bones after years of carrying burdens. My hands still trembled, but no longer from rage. They trembled with release, with the feeling of years of silence finally broken. I looked at him and spoke softly, no longer with the fire of confrontation, but with the warmth of truth. I never wanted you to feel guilty, I said. I wanted you to fly higher than I ever could. That is why I stayed low. That is why I let the world take from me, so it would never take from you. His eyes lifted slightly, glassy with unshed tears, and I knew my words were cutting through his defenses. The truth of sacrifice is that it often goes unseen until the moment it is too late to repay. I had accepted long ago that my son might never understand the full measure of what I had given, but seeing him now, standing in silence, his face etched with conflict, I felt hope flicker inside me. Maybe this was the moment. Maybe this was when the seeds of realization would finally take root. I leaned forward, my voice steady but tender. I do not regret a single choice I made for you, I said. If I had to, I would give it all again. But the only thing I ask is this. Never measure a man by the clothes on his back. Measure him by the scars on his hands and the love in his heart. His lips parted, but still no words came. Instead, his shoulders shook slightly, his chest heaved, and I saw the pride in him breaking, cracking under the weight of truth. And then, slowly, a single tear rolled down his cheek. It was small, almost invisible, but to me, it was everything. I had waited years, not for an apology, not for gratitude, but for recognition. That single tear was more than words could ever give. It was the first sign that he saw me, truly saw me, not as a shadow behind him, but as the foundation beneath him. I reached out, my old hand trembling as it moved toward him. For a moment I thought he would pull away, but he didn't. His hand met mine, hesitant at first, then firmer, gripping as though afraid I would slip away. The warmth of his hand against mine was not the same as when he was a child. It was stronger now, larger, but in that moment it felt the same. I closed my eyes, and in that simple touch, decades of silence, pain, and sacrifice melted. The distance between us closed, not with words, but with something deeper, understanding. As he gripped my hand, I whispered, "One day you will stand where I stand. You will give, and maybe the world will never notice, but your child will. And when that day comes, you will remember this moment, and you will understand everything without me saying a word." He nodded faintly, his tears now falling freely, and though his lips still did not shape an apology, I knew the bond between us had been reforged, stronger, not despite the pain, but because of it. The air in the room felt lighter, though the walls had witnessed the heaviest of confessions. I looked at my old shirt, stained with tears, and for the first time I didn't see it as a burden. I saw it as a badge, not of poverty, not of shame, but of endurance. That shirt had carried me through the years, and now it had carried me to this moment of truth with my son. I smiled faintly, and he looked at me differently, not as a man broken by life, but as a man who had lived for love. In his eyes, I began to see something new, a flicker of respect, fragile but growing. It would take time, I knew. Change does not come in an instant, but the seed had been planted. He would remember my words, remember my tears, remember the trembling strength in my voice. And one day, when life stripped him of his illusions, when he stood in old clothes of his own, he would finally grasp the depth of my love. I leaned back in my chair, exhaustion washing over me, but it was a different kind of exhaustion, lighter, freer. For the first time in years, I felt no weight pressing on my chest. I had spoken my truth, I had reclaimed my dignity, and I had seen the walls in my son's heart begin to crumble. Whatever came next next, I knew this. He would never look at me the same way again. He might not fully understand today, but the path to understanding had begun. And so, in the quiet, after the storm, I felt something I had not felt in a very long time. Peace. Peace, not because everything was resolved, but because I had found the courage to reveal my soul. Peace, because I no longer carried the burden of silence. And as I watched my son wipe his tears, I realized that transformation is not just his, it is mine too. I had transformed from silence to voice, from shadow to truth, from shame to pride. And in that transformation, I discovered that even the most tattered clothes can carry the weight of a king's heart. I rose slowly from my chair, my body aching from the years that had carved themselves into my bones, but my heart lighter than it had been in decades. My son stood before me, no longer smirking, no longer blind but silent. His silence now was not of dismissal, but of reverence. He looked at me as though he had just met me for the first time, as though I were not just his father, but a man whose story was finally visible. And in that look I felt a shift so profound that words could barely hold it. My torn shirt clung to me like a second skin, but in that moment it no longer felt like rags. It felt like armor, a testament to a life lived in sacrifice, a life lived for love. I told him gently, "Son, one day you will face the mirror, and you will see your youth fading, your clothes wearing thin, your body slowing down. And if you are blessed, you will also see your child walking tall, unburdened because of what you gave. Then you will know that love is not measured in what we wear, but in what we give away." My voice carried not anger, not pain, but calm certainty, like the steady flow of a river that had endured storms, but still found its way to the sea. He swallowed hard, his eyes glistening, and I could see the words he wanted to say, but could not yet form. That was enough. For now, silence was its own confession. I placed my hand on his shoulder, firm but tender, and added, "Never forget where you came from. Never despise the roots that nourish you, because the moment you turn against them, you begin to wither, no matter how tall you think you stand." He nodded slightly, his head bowed, and I knew my words had struck deep. Whether he admitted it today or years from now, he would carry them like fire in his heart. Fire that would burn away arrogance. Fire that would light his path when pride threatened to blind him again. The room around us felt different now, as though the air itself had shifted. The walls that had once been heavy with silence now seemed to breathe, to echo with truth. My son stood taller, but not with arrogance, with humility, and I, though dressed in rags, felt like a king. Not because I had wealth, not because I had status, but because I had done what kings rarely do. I had given everything for another, without asking for anything in return. That, to me, was the greatest crown a man could ever wear. I wanted him to understand one final thing, so I spoke with all the softness I had left in me. The world will judge you by appearances, by wealth, by the shine of your shoes and the cut of your suit. But remember, son, none of that will matter when the lights go out. What matters is who you lifted, who you sacrificed for, who you loved so deeply that you were willing to lose yourself. That is the true measure of a man. His lips quivered, and finally he whispered, almost inaudibly, "I see you now, Dad." And with those words, my heart broke and healed at the same time. I pulled him into an embrace, one we had not shared in years. His body pressed against mine, and I felt his tears soak into the very shirt he had once mocked. And in that embrace, every wound, every night of hunger, every day of toil, seemed to find its purpose. I had not failed. I had not given in vain. He was my legacy, my living proof that love, though often invisible, can shape a future brighter than the giver ever imagined. As I held him, I thought of all the fathers who walk unseen, whose sacrifices are buried beneath laughter, beneath mockery, beneath the shallow judgments of the world. Fathers who sell their dreams so their children can build theirs. Fathers who go unnoticed, unthanked, uncelebrated. I thought of them and realized I was not alone. My story was their story. My torn clothes were their torn clothes. And maybe, just maybe, by telling it I could remind the world to look deeper. I stepped back, wiping my face, and told him, "You have a choice now. You can repeat the blindness, or you can open your eyes. You can laugh at the old clothes of those who raised you, or you can honor them. The choice will define not just who you are, but the kind of father, the kind of man you will one day become." His gaze locked with mine, and for the first time I saw no mockery there, no shame, only recognition, only respect. The truth is, transformation is never just one-sided. As he changed before me, I changed too. I realized that I had spent years hiding my pain, swallowing my truth, believing silence was love. But love, real love, is not silence. Love is voice. Love is truth. Love is showing the scars, not hiding them. And in speaking, I had not only freed him, I had freed myself. I turned toward the window, the night sky stretching wide above us, and I felt hope in my chest again. Hope that tomorrow would not be the same as yesterday. Hope that my son would walk with new eyes, eyes, seeing not just what shines but also what bleeds. And maybe, just maybe, he would carry this story to his children so they would never make the same mistake. I knew the journey ahead would not be perfect. He would falter, he would forget, he would stumble back into pride. But the seed had been planted, and seeds do not vanish. They wait, they grow, they break through stone if they must. My words, my truth, my life, they were now inside him, waiting for the day they would bloom. As I turned back to him, I spoke one final lesson. Respect the sacrifices of those who built the path beneath your feet. Never laugh at the hands that fed you, and never, ever let the world convince you that love is measured in clothing, wealth, or titles. Love is sacrifice, and sacrifice is sacred. He nodded again, more firmly this time, and I could see the determination settling into him. Perhaps he would stumble, but he would not forget. Perhaps he would fall, but he would rise with my words echoing inside him. And that was enough for me. I walked to my room, folded my old shirt neatly, and placed it on the chair beside my bed. I touched its worn fabric with gentle fingers, whispering, "You carried me well." And for the first time, I did not see it as a symbol of what I had lost, but as proof of what I had given, proof of a love so vast, it had no need for recognition. And so to anyone who hears my story, I say this: do not wait until it is too late to honor the sacrifices made for you. Do not laugh at the rags that fed you, clothed you, protected you. Look deeper. See the love in the scars, the pride in the sacrifices, the dignity in the old clothes. For one day you may wear them too, and when you do, you will pray your children see not the fabric but the story behind it. So I leave you with this: call your father, call your mother, thank them, not for the things you saw, but for the battles you never did, for the meals you ate while they stayed hungry, for the clothes you wore while theirs grew old, for the dreams you lived because they buried theirs. Do it now while you still can, because tomorrow is never promised, and regret is heavier than any torn shirt.